Hello everyone. The Pali project is extremely happy to relaunch Prep with Pali, which will be a series of sessions to help students reach their academic goals. We have Meera Bharadwaj with us today. She has completed her master's degree in global affairs from Columbia University, and she is currently working as a business development associate at Lumia Education. She is also a former Gandhi Fellow who is passionate about education, and she has worked with various NGOs and governmental agencies. Without any further ado, let's jump right into the session. So, Meera, how did you decide that you were going to pursue an MA in global affairs?
To begin with, I think when I decided to pursue my master's, I had one objective. It was because I already did my undergrad and I was working for a while. So when I decided to do my master's, my one objective was to be able to study a lot, to be able to experience a different kind of education system from what I had here. So that was my main objective, was to be able to, with that objective, I moved to like search for courses and in different universities, and that's how I came across my master's in global thought, which is essentially this pan-university course that allows you to take classes from any school in Colombia. So I felt like it was perfect for me because I want to take as many classes as I can and as many like versatile classes as I can. And this course let me do that. And that's how I ended up, applying for this program and doing it.
That's great. Okay, let's talk about shortlisting universities. Did you go by any rankings or did you look at the structure of the program or any other specifications?
So I went by two specifications, if you can call it. So one, to begin with, I made a list of all the subjects I had learned, maybe in my undergrad or courses I had taken, like for any subjects that I had learned academically. I made a list of those. And then I made a list of subjects that I was interested in learning about, something that maybe I had worked in before from my previous work experiences, or something that I just really wanted to take a class in and know more about. So I made these two lists. So I had these two lists, maybe overlapping, maybe not, some were not. So then I wanted to search for a course that offered me a combination of these two lists. And that was sort of the structure with which I went to search for courses. So when I looked at different courses in universities, the first thing I went to and looked at was like the breakdown of the subjects they had through the semesters to see how well they aligned with the list I had. And that was one of the main criteria for choosing a program for myself.
All right. Now, is it very important to have many relevant experiences when
I
applying to
think it
these top
does,
schools?
especially for us as Indians who aspire to go and study abroad, because in a way we're competing with students from around the world. So we're going to be judged, or our application is going to be judged on par with students from their own country or different countries. So that's going to be the level that we have to match. So in order to do that, I think it's very essential to have some sort of experience in the field you want to study. And I think the most obvious sort of experience is obviously, an internship where it directly corresponds to the course you want to do. But this need not necessarily be the only channel of, experience you can gain. You can do research. You can probably work under somebody on a research project. You can own a small business. You can do arts, or you're good at sports. So all this counts. So I think the main thing to keep in mind is how you're going to translate your experience and show it on your application. So it's more about transferable skills. So yeah, I may have, I don't know, like I'm good at a certain sport. So what is it from that sport that I have learned that's going to help me do well in this course? And to be able to do that is the main thing. So it doesn't matter what you choose to do, as like an extracurricular or as an experience you need to have before that. But I think it's more about translating that in your application.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences, either having an internship or assisting in research?
So I'm a big research nerd myself. So I enjoy research a lot, and I always, was drawn to research, and I always make sure that whatever work I'm doing, I there's some element of research to it. So, naturally, I ended up doing internships that were very research focused. I worked on policy research with governments. I worked on advocacy work with NGOs. So I think it's so important for, from a context of an Indian student as well, because in our current education system, research is not given a lot of importance. We're not pushed to do research in any way when we're in school or like in undergrad. We're not. But it's only when we sort of move to another country to study, or at least for me personally, I realized how important the aspect of research is, because your entire course sort of revolves around research, and you studying and writing papers and submitting it, and that's sort of like the entire process of how things are done there. And even in our application, I think one of the main things they try to see is if we do have that skill and if we're able to do that. So I think it's very important for a student who wants to go somewhere else, like outside the country and study, to pay attention to research and to do research and to at least have that sort of backing to be able to say that, yeah, I can do it. If I have to do it, if I'm able to do it, I'm confident to do it. And I think that's very important for a student, and it's definitely something that anybody who is aspiring to go outside should pay attention to do that. And that's something that I learned from my personal experience as well, and it's helped me uh, not just for my masters and being able to study there, but also for my current work now. um, it really pays off when you have that experience, and when you learn how to do research, it really pays off later. So yeah, I think it's something that I highly recommend.
Thank you for that. Moving on, you have worked as a research associate with the Ministry of Rural Development. So, how did your work here contribute to your master's degree?
So at the Ministry of Rural Development, I worked directly under the IAS officer there, and it was a policy research sort of role. So they wanted to revamp some major policies they had for the upcoming year. So they wanted some researchers to come in. They wanted us to study the policy and see how it was doing, how it was being implemented, and give recommendations. And that was the entire project. And that was something new to me, because that was the first time I was doing a policy research at such a high level, because it was just analyze the policy for the entire state. So it's such a broad research statement, and you're just like, okay, but where do I start? So I think that entire experience really, although like on a daily basis, I don't do such an elaborate research in my everyday work, right? But I think when you go through that elaborate research process, you really understand how it is done, and how, for me, I really understood how a policy really comes about, because I had to visit a lot of districts, talk to like the beneficiaries of the policy, and then draft up the policy. And then I was able to see how it gets processed within the ministry, how it gets approved, how funds are allocated to it, and everything. So I think just the whole lifetime of a policy, and when you have a document to how it is implemented at the end of the day, I think it just gave me like a very holistic view of how things are done. We always sit and wonder how these big policies come about and how they're being implemented. You have no idea, because you're just like, okay, there is a policy, but to be able to actually see it from like, oh, this is how it is, but then to being implemented, I think that was very fascinating to me. And I think till today, I think it's the biggest research project that I have been part of. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. And it's wild to see how it works. And I was handling just two policies, and to be able to just imagine how many policies we have in this country on an everyday basis, and how every minute of the day something is happening in that process. So I think overall it was very fascinating to me.
Thank you for that elaborate answer. Now, let's talk about writing samples. According to you, how should students go about it to best demonstrate their knowledge?
I think, according to me, I'm just going to talk about what worked best for me when it comes to a writing sample. Obviously, I did not have a writing sample already made before. And I think that goes to a lot of Indian students because we're not pushed to write in school, as opposed to what I noticed when at least I went to the US. A lot of high schoolers there, they're pushed to write papers. So when it comes to college applications, it's pretty easy for them because they already have a writing sample of sorts that they can just modify and send it in. But for me, it was something that I had to write from scratch. So what I did was first to just have a knowledge dump, because what universities are trying to see are two things. Is one, if you have some sort of a knowledge base in whatever you choose to write about, and second, if you're able to structurally present it. Those are the two things they want to see in a writing sample. So what I first did was to just have like a knowledge dump, just have a document, choose a topic that I feel confident about, that I feel I have, a substantial amount of knowledge in, and I just throw in all my thoughts, throw in all the resources I have, just have like a dump and just say, okay, this is like a topic. I'm just going to put everything I know there is into this. And that sort of gives you already a structure of, okay, this is what I have to work with. And then for writing the writing sample, I think there are so many templates out there, really good resources that tell you what the subheadings should be for your writing sample, and I think that's a good template to follow. Once you have that, you look at your knowledge dump and you say, okay, this goes into like an introduction, or this goes into like a recommendation, and then you put all that, and then you sort of structurally refine it. And I think that's worked best for me. And I think like for me that was also very sort of time, it wasn't time intensive because I knew what was there, I knew what I had to do. Like I wasn't lost in one bit, I didn't know what was next. I knew what was going to come next in my paper. So I think that worked best for me. But yeah, I think there are so many resources out there on how to write it as well. And I think it works different for everybody. It's always like a trial and error. I think when you're writing a writing sample, uh, sometimes you start writing one and then you just have to like omit it and then start a new one. So I think it's again to each their own.
Absolutely. All right. So, what aspects are important to write a successful statement of academic purpose or SOP?
I yeah, SOP is so interesting because there's so much, I think, hype around it, and the first thing that comes to your mind when you are applying somewhere is like, oh, I have to write this SOP, and then it's got such a like, oh my God, it's going to be like the most hectic thing. Um, but I think there's one thing that I wish someone had told me before writing the SOP is it's not that difficult. It really isn't. Writing the SOP is not difficult. I think the difficult part is refining it and making it like a good SOP for a university. I think that's the difficult part. Um, and what I would recommend for students to do is to choose two people or three, whatever makes you comfortable. Maybe one's a friend, one is like someone professionally, or someone who's, or and maybe one is like a teacher or a professor or anything. Like choose three people or two people from completely different walks of life, and just reach out to them and say, hey, I'm writing an SOP. Can you be like a potential like editor for my SOP? Can you give me feedback on my SOP on a regular basis? And just ask these people. And I'm pretty sure like people are willing to help all the time. Just reach out to them and say, hey, I just want you to help me with this SOP. So every time you have a draft, like a first draft or a second draft or whatever of your SOP, you send it to these two or three people, and they send back like a bunch of recommendations and they edit it for you. And I think that immensely helps because it takes the load off you, like the pressure off you a little bit, because you are like, okay, I have these three people who are knowledgeable and they're going to help me. And also it gives you time to the whole editing process and refining process, like it takes the load off that, and it gives you time to put more substance into your SOP and say, okay, uh, this person has recommended that I add something around this. So what can that be? So for you to just sit and reflect on your experiences and put that in. And I think another major thing about the SOP, I would say, is to just put in your experiences and to just write about it honestly. And I think that really comes through when you do that. If you have done something in terms of like an internship or another activity or anything, to just honestly write about it, whether it was a success or a failure. It doesn't matter. If it was a failure, then write about the failure. If it was success, write about the success. I think it's, if you can honestly write about it, and if you're able to show them that, hey, I had this experience, it was a success or a failure, this is what I learned from it, and this is what I learned about myself, or I learned about the world, and this is how I grew. If you're able to sort of draw this entire sort of parallel and put that into your SOP, I think that really comes through, and that's sort of like, that's something that they look for, and that brings out like an essence of what kind of person you are as well. So I think those are the two main things I would say help me the best.
That's great. So, most universities require letters of recommendations, and there's a common confusion as to which professors should be approached. So, can you talk a little bit about this?
So the most common, I think, when I was applying, and when I asked people, was to just uh, go to my head of department and ask them for a letter of recommendation, which is sort of like the most obvious when it comes to letter of recommendation. But I think apart from that, what helps, I think the next go to will obviously be like a professor that you have a good rapport with. So you feel comfortable enough to go ask for a letter of recommendation. I think another thing that's very important to keep in mind is to also reach out to a professor that sort of corresponds to the course you want to do. Either they are the professor for this course, or they have done research in this field, or they have something to do with the course you're applying to. Maybe they've worked in that field before. So it helps when you have a professor vouching for you and they've had prior experience, or they're, they work in this particular field that you're applying to. I think that really helps, because it also tells the person who's reading your application that you have worked with this professor, you have worked already with someone in this field. So it automatically adds to like the list of experiences you have, or the knowledge base you have in the field. So I think it helps to reach out to someone like that, and also to reach out to a professor who knows you. I know it's pretty difficult, very often there are so many students, and when you probably reach out to a professor like 2 or 3 years later, highly unlikely that they'll remember you. But if there is a professor that will remember you, I think it's worth reaching out to them and having them write a letter of recommendation, because uh, when they know you, they're going to put in the effort to write a letter for you, and they're going to also actually think about how to make it better. And it's not going to be some sort of template that they're just going to write and sign for you. And I think that comes through as well in the final letter of recommendation. And I think even today, like when professors have to submit a letter of recommendation, they have to also answer a bunch of other questions. It's not just about the letter anymore. They're asked multiple questions as well. So when a professor knows you personally, when they have to go online and answer those questions, I think it really helps, because they're going to actually put in the effort to do that. And so, so yeah, it would help to choose professors that you're well acquainted with as well.
Well, all right. How did you go about preparing for the English language test, be it IELTS or TOEFL?
I think the first go to for every student is just to like go online and Google search it and be like, how do I study for this? Like, give me the material, give me a schedule, and I'll do it. So obviously, I think as a first like reaction, mine was as well to go online and be like, okay, how do I go about this? I think what I found very helpful, there are so many resources out there. There's no shortage of resources. If you really want resources, you can go You can find books, you can find resources, anything. What I found very beneficial is to sort of join these uh, Facebook or Reddit groups of students who are studying for the same exams, and I think it really helps because they like it's about sharing resources among students, and that you can ask questions in those forums. So I think for me, what really helped was to be part of that forum and to keep up to date with that and to use the resources that the forums provided and to ask questions I had. Because I chose not to go for a class, which is fine. And it's also fine if you do choose to. But for someone who does not choose to go for a class and write the exam, I think it's very beneficial to sort of have that community of people who are studying for the same exam. And I think it really also, in a way, like builds your confidence because you have like a lot of people on the same boat as you, I guess. So I would, I think that was one thing that really helped me during these exams.
All right. Now, there are several scholarships available from both the university side and different organizations.
Mhm.
So, how do you think one can increase their chance of securing a good scholarship?
I think before you start applying or you decide to apply or anything, I think searching for a scholarship is like step one before you search for a university or anything. Yeah, of course, universities give scholarships, and that's something that you can definitely apply to as well with your application. But there are so many scholarships out there that uh, have certain, obviously every scholarship has like terms and conditions and like who is eligible and everything. So I think as step one, if you can do that research and make a list of scholarships that you're applicable for uh, before even going into this research of universities, you already sort of have an idea of, okay, I'm eligible for this is the criteria, this I need to submit X writing samples, X recommendation letters, X whatever. So I think when you already have an idea of that, along with your application, what you need to submit with that, it really helps because when it comes to scholarships, you have to submit like a letter of recommendation. That's like a general criteria. So when you get like a letter of recommendation for your application, you also can get it for your scholarship. So it's about being smart about it and just knowing where you stand and what you need to get done for these scholarships. Um, and also, I think it's really helpful to just dive deep and do research into scholarships because it's such a deep sea there, and there are so many of them. So not just for your course, like you can also find scholarships for different things. I know there are scholarships for like the entire visa process. I know there are scholarships for living expenditure if you are like academically or you have a lot of extracurriculars. There are scholarships for that. So I think, again, to do a lot of research to find these, to be part of student forums such as yours, to know what's available out there, um, and if you're eligible and what you need to do. I think that's the best way to prepare for a scholarship or increase your chances is to just be the first person to do it and to do it properly.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about various expenses apart from the tuition fee, of course, and how can students wisely use their money?
This was something that I really felt like I wish someone had told me about this before I went to study because I feel like we don't talk about this enough. It's all about like, oh, this is how much it costs for me to study this and everything, but there's so much like additional cost once you go to study or before you go to study, and there's so many things you can do, and I think students often end up finding this by themselves. But I feel like if someone just spoke about this and made a note of it, it'll just help so many people. um, so I think to start off with, there's obviously the application cost, the visa cost, the travel costs, all the costs that are associated before you actually get to the place where you're going to study. Um, and even after you get to the place you're going to study, there are so many smarter ways for a student at least to handle their expenditure. Um, One thing I would highly recommend is if you have chosen a university or if you're applying to 5, 6 universities, join university forums. There are so many Facebook groups, there are so many Reddit subreddits with the universities and the students who have applied or students who are there. Join all those forums because they have essential information on housing and everything else, and it can really save your time and money if you scout for these early on and you sort of make those connections already. It really helps in the long run, and also really removes the stress from housing and food and all of that. um, Second, I would definitely say get a job at your university, and don't search for a job after you go to university. You can search for a job before you join as well. All universities put out job roles on their website or forums or wherever. Find out where they put it. You can apply for it and you can interview and get a job before you reach there, and you can start working immediately at university. And I think another like really common thing is if you're a student, you get a lot of perks, be it at bookstores, at places, food places, at when you buy technology, which is everyone has to buy technology for universities. When you buy technology, when you use like streaming services, you get a lot of like benefits. When you, I don't know, shop for clothes, if you're a student, you get benefits everywhere. So to just, and generally universities provide this information, at least like university student councils provide this information. So just discover all of those and just know that, okay, I'm a student and I get all these benefits. You save up on a lot of costs. And I wish that's something that someone told me before I joined, and that was something that I discovered later on, and I was like, ah, I just spent so many months not knowing this. I just wish I knew this earlier. So yeah, I think that. And yeah, I think those are the main things I wish someone told me about expenditure. Yeah, I'm not sure if I missed something. I probably did, but I think these are the big main chunks that I wish I knew before I went to study.
All right. That brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you very much, Meera, and thank you to everyone who's watching. See you soon in the next session.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.